My grandkids call me Gigi, and these are my adventures.
Hi, I'm on the road again. For this part of my national park quest, I'm in southern U.S., starting in the center in Texas and working my way out to the west coast. The weather's been colder overnight than I really would have expected, although I guess you should expect that in the winter. But except for last week, the daytimes have been sunny and quite pleasant. So I started out in Big Bend National Park along the Rio Grande in South Texas. And that's a big park. It's about 1,200 acres, I believe. And it has a lot of variation in elevation and topography and vegetation. So that was a lot of fun to experience. My first night there, I was in the part of the park that's really very close to the Rio Grande. And that wasn't at all really what I expected. It was much slower flowing and shallower than I had imagined, although I recognize it's winter and it's probably when there's the least amount of water flowing. Along there was the remnants of an old bathhouse that had been built on a hot spring. So there was some foundational pieces left. And you could sit in this hot spring area right on the Rio Grande and look out at some pretty landscapes. So that was kind of fun. The other thing that I experienced that I didn't expect was along all of the hiking trails and many of the scenic overlooks along the road in that area were little on-the-ground markets. So some homemade or handmade goods that were displayed there for sale. And I never saw a human attending any of these on-the-ground markets, but there was usually a coffee can or something else to put money in if there was something that you decided you were going to purchase. So I have to say, combining hiking and shopping seemed like a really good idea to me, and was a lot of fun, just saying. I spent one night in that area, and then I moved up to the mountainous area of the park, and that was spectacularly beautiful, just like mountains typically are. Those are the Chihuahuan Mountains, and the campground that I stayed at was kind of right at the base of the mountains, so it was just a beautiful view from inside the camper or inside the van as well. There I had probably one of my top 3 favorite hikes. So it's a trail called The View, and I'll leave some information in the comments in case you're ever in the area and want to do it. But it's about I think 4.5 mile kind of round trip hike. Relatively flat or reasonably flat, not a huge elevation change. And the trail goes through the desert through some just spectacular cacti and yucca and vegetation that's very appealing to me. Just a huge cactus, just kind of unbelievable and spectacular. And you walk along somewhat the base of the mountains, so you have some shade and some really sunny stretches of the trail. So just a really pretty and pleasant hike. At the end of that, you get to kind of, I'd liken it almost to like a slot canyon. So you're standing in between 2 very large mountains that are reasonably close together. And then you're standing on the edge of a cliff, looking out over this vast landscape of desert. So it was just really breathtaking and quite spectacular to experience. Then on my way back along that same trail, I saw a herd of probably a dozen aoudad that were navigating the side of a cliff and feeding on it and kind of moving up and down it. So I stopped and watched them for the longest time. I've seen them in a zoo, of course, but there's something that's pretty amazing about seeing them in their natural habitat. So that was really cool. I left there a day early with some heater problems, and I'll probably talk about that a little bit more in my next video. Spent a couple of days in Midland, Texas, trying to chase after a resolution to that, and then just booked a service appointment a week or a week and a half out in New Mexico here where I was going to be. So my next stop then was Guadalupe Mountains. That's another national park that's in Texas. And that one, the weather was not nice during the days, or really overnight for that matter. And much of the hiking there is really geared towards people who like to, kind of climb or do much bigger elevation changes in their hikes than what, I'm interested or probably capable of doing. So there were 2 hikes there that were, pleasant and nice in what they call their lowlands. But for me, nothing spectacular compared to some of the other ones that I've experienced. The other park on that part of my trek was Carlsbad Caverns, and that is just really phenomenal. I had no idea how huge, although, you read about it, but until you get in and experience, it's hard to really imagine. Just this huge cavern that had a very nice self-guided tour that you could walk around and experience. So I actually spent 2 days there. Once in this huge room in a self-guided tour, and then the other day I was on a ranger guided tour that took you through 4 rooms that you couldn't experience just kind of in the general public self-guided way of visiting the caverns. So I greatly enjoyed that part. I also had another new experience. So while I was at the campground for Carlsbad Caverns and Guadalupe Mountains, one of the evenings when I crawled into bed and turned out the lights, I heard some scurrying and scampering around the camper. So got up, turned on the lights, and of course could see or find nothing. So I grabbed a flashlight, turned off the lights again, and the scurrying and scampering began again over by a loaf of bread that I had up on the counter near my stove and sink. So turned the flashlight on and shined it over there, and of course you know where this story's going. There was a darn mouse in my camper. So I had considered what would happen if there was mice that got in when I was kind of storing it in my driveway over the winter, but had never really thought about one climbing in with me to stay warm when the nights got cold while I was traveling. So it was about 9 o'clock at night. Thankfully, Walmart in Carlsbad, which was about a 40-minute drive away, was open until 11. So I drove in, got traps, got them set, and by about 1:30 in the next morning, it was all over. But not something that I necessarily planned on or would hope to repeat. So my next stop on my trip will be out at White Sands, and I'll do an update after that park. And with that, I'll move on to my tip of the video. So for my tip for this video, I want to focus on being very expansive in your thoughts about your contingency planning. I have a bin in the back of my van that has things that I had thought about that I hoped I wouldn't need, but felt that I might and should be prepared for. So things like diesel fuel treatment. So this is my first diesel vehicle. I researched what happened when you have diesel fuel in cold weather, and have 2 products that help either prevent or deal with diesel gelling. I'd also really taken a hard look at all the fuses that were in both the the van part and the cabin part of the camper and made sure that I had replacement fuses for all of them. One of the things that I never considered was a live rodent that might come into the camper with me while I was traveling. And so rest assured now I have extra traps in that contingency bin. So learn a lesson from me and also just try to be very expansive in your thoughts of what things you might need to have along just in case. And that's my tip for this video. So now on to my scenic reel.